Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're taking a highly analytical, incredibly specific look at a text regarding food prep. But we're looking specifically at the exact physical mechanics required to prepare an udder for cooking under ancient Jewish law. It's this really fascinating, deeply grounded intersection where everyday kitchen reality just crashes right into rigorous legal theory. So we're going to look really closely at the actual physical actions required to process this specific cut of meat to make sure it aligns with some very strict dietary laws.
Okay, let's dive right into this. How exactly do you prepare an udder for cooking? If you think about it from just a purely mechanical standpoint, preparing a piece of meat that naturally produces and contains milk presents a pretty immediate, obvious problem when your dietary laws strictly forbid cooking and eating milk and meat together, right? We aren't just talking about abstract legal philosophy here. We're talking about a cook standing in a kitchen, holding a piece of meat, and needing to know exactly where to make the cut and exactly how much force to apply. What physical actions actually solve this legal dilemma?
Well, to understand the required mechanics, we first kind of have to understand the biological and legal reality of what we can call the udder paradox. An udder is a cut of meat, obviously, but it's filled with milk. So why is this a paradox? Because this milk was never actually gathered from the outside. The source text points out this really crucial distinction between, say, the milk inside a calf's stomach and the milk inside an udder. See, the milk a calf drinks is legally defined as fully realized milk the very second it leaves the mother's teat. It was gathered from the outside world into the calf's innards. But the milk inside the udder, it was never collected from the outside. It's generated and found naturally right there within the flesh itself. And because of that totally unique physical reality, its legal standing is completely different from a standard drop of milk.
And this brilliantly illustrates the resulting legal split we're dealing with. On one hand, we have foundational Torah law. And by strict Torah law, cooking an udder with its internal milk doesn't actually violate the core prohibition. That's precisely because that milk isn't legally defined as fully realized milk yet. Since it wasn't collected from the outside, it's viewed almost as just a part of the flesh itself. But on the other hand, we have the rabbinic decree. The sages instituted a secondary law, basically a safeguard, that requires the proactive physical removal of that milk before cooking can even begin. And that right there creates our central conundrum. Since the prohibition here is a rabbinic safeguard, exactly how far do you have to go physically to remove that milk? What is the legally required mechanical intervention before this meat can go into the cooking pot?
Section 1. The stringent physical mechanics. So what must this physical intervention actually look like? Well, the first legal voice we encounter introduces what we can safely call the stringent solution, and this demands absolute extraction. This opinion essentially argues that to satisfy the rabbinic decree, you can't just casually rinse the meat or make a tiny little incision. No, it demands a really rigorous application of physical force to make absolutely sure every possible trace of that milk is forced out of the chambers of the flesh. Here is the exact three-step mechanical process demanded by this stringent view, and I want you to really notice the verbs here. Tear lengthwise, tear widthwise, smear against a wall. It is a deeply visceral, tactile set of instructions. You are literally required to make a crisscross cut, tearing it both lengthwise and widthwise to completely open the internal vascular structure of the meat. And actually, that's not even enough. Then you have to take that torn meat and physically press and smear it against a hard, flat surface like a wall, just to forcefully squeeze out the remaining milk. It is a highly demanding, highly physical kitchen procedure designed to leave absolutely no room for doubt.
Section 2. A dinner table application.
Now, the text doesn't just stop with theoretical, intensive mechanics. It transitions brilliantly into a real-world scenario. It records this really brief, seemingly mundane interaction between a prominent rabbi, Rabbi Elazar, and his attendant. Here's the quote, "Tear an udder for me before you roast it, and I will eat it." Just picture the scene here. It's a casual, everyday dinner table environment. The rabbi is just giving a direct, practical instruction to his cook right before a meal. It's totally straightforward. But notice what's missing. It entirely lacks the intensive, multi-step anxiety of that stringent ruling we just looked at.
So the crucial point we have to ask is, what is this everyday episode actually teaching us? I mean, why would the compilers of a dense, highly analytical legal text even bother to record a casual dinner order? Well, they didn't include this just to give us a glimpse into Rabbi Elazar's diet. They included it because this incredibly brief, mundane instruction fundamentally alters the entire legal landscape we've been analyzing.
Section 3. The lenient single tier.
That simple instruction to an attendant actually establishes a much more lenient, much more practical ruling for kitchen preparation. When we contrast these two legal opinions side by side, we have the stringent view on one hand, right? Tear lengthwise, tear widthwise, and physically smear the meat forcefully against a wall. But on the other hand, we have the lenient view directly derived from that dinner table story. Rabbi Elazar simply said to his attendant, "Tear and udder for me." He didn't specify a crisscross pattern, he didn't say tear it lengthwise and widthwise, and he certainly didn't tell his attendant to start smearing his dinner against the kitchen wall. He just asked for a single tear.
And that gives us the final takeaway for the physical mechanics. Based on that really practical dinner interaction, the final ruling requires only a single physical tear, and it can be either lengthwise or widthwise. It completely does away with the crisscross requirement, and it entirely eliminates the need to press or smear the meat against a wall. The law still honors the rabbinic decree to proactively remove the milk, for sure, but it limits the physical burden placed on the person actually preparing the food to a single, practical, and manageable action.
So in ancient kitchen mechanics, meet legal decrees. What is the minimum physical action required to honor the law? This text just brilliantly shows us that while a theoretical legal approach might demand absolute extraction, smearing meat against walls to satisfy a decree, practical reality and recorded precedent fairly often shape the law into something deeply manageable. In this case, just a single deliberate tear. It's a really wonderful look at how practical reality shapes legal requirements. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope it leaves you as eager as I am to keep analyzing more of these fascinating texts.